Hey y'all, and welcome to Skyrim Scripting. Today's episode is all about arrays. Now, arrays are lists of stuff. It could be books or it could be boots. It doesn't matter, but it's essential to your Papyrus scripting learning experience to write Skyrim scripts. So I've pulled together an agenda of 5 items that we're going to go through to get you from beginner to master. So let's get started and take a quick look at that agenda. First, we're going to go through the very basics. We're just going to make an array, and we're going to put people in it. We're going to put actors in that array. It will be an actor array, and we're just going to track all of the actors who punch the player. We're going to keep adding them to the list as many times as they punch the player, which will be great and get you up and running with the basics. Then we will do searching of lists. We're going to ask a list, hey, do you already have this actor? So we can use that to just track unique actors who punched us. So if Sven keeps punching us, we don't keep adding them to the same list. We only add him once. After that, we're going to track how many times each actor hits us, so we can keep track of Sven hitting us twice and Alvor hitting us 3 times, etc., etc. And so for that, we're going to be simulating a thing called an associative array, but is so much simpler than that. You don't have to worry about what it's called. After that, we're going to look at an SKSE feature, which is critical to your array experience, which allows you to resize arrays. That is not something you can do without SKSE or using some other form of array, like through JContainers arrays and things of that nature. And then finally, we're going to show you a way that you can store arrays of arrays so that we can actually track how many times each actor hit you with each weapon. So if Sven starts stabbing us with his dagger, and then we go into his inventory and steal his dagger away, and he starts punching us with his fists or hitting us with an axe or whatever, we can see that someone hit us with these different weapons a certain number of times as a way to test out making sure that we can store arrays in arrays or simulate doing so. So let's hop on in. Let's make a mod. What are we gonna call it? I don't know. But first I'm gonna go small, cause otherwise I'll be in your way. Alright, that's my fault in my going small sound. Alright, let's make it, let's call it Punch Out. I'm sure there won't be any liability, copyright issues there. Punch Out. And as always, just boot up Creation Kit however you like to boot up Creation Kit. I'm going to do it through Mod Organizer 2, but you do you. And we just need to keep track of when a player gets hit. So all we are going to need is a player script. So we'll make that on a brand new quest. So we're going to save Punch Out. And we'll go over to Character Quest. And we'll make a new quest just called like Punch Out Quest. So always we'll close that and reopen it. And then we're going to Quest Aliases. We're going to right click, New Reference Alias. Call this Player Ref. That's REF. So many times we've done this before. Fill type specific reference, select forced reference, choose cell any, and it will pre-populate ref, player ref. Otherwise, choose them from the drop-down, and we're going to make a script up there. So click new script, and we're gonna call it a punch out player script. And it will extend a reference alias like we always do. This represents the player. Ta-da! Alright. And now, as always, what I'm going to ask you to do, let me go ahead and save this first, is open up this quest. Open up that quest alias. Right-click on this script and edit all of the code in this box. And then occasionally, you're going to Control-S to save, and then you can try stuff out in the game. But that box is a little bit small, and it's not colorful enough for me, so I'm going to switch on over to Visual Studio Code. Here we are. I've got the text. It's the same text as yours, but mine's just big and colorful. So what do we want to do? We want to track when this player gets hit. So we can just go ahead and search on creationkit.com and find the on hit event. I've already got that open, but you can, as always, if you want to, go to creationkit.com, click on the left for Skyrim, go to scripting reference, scroll down to subcategory events, and search that page for events like on hit and all of the other wonderful, wonderful events that we get. Now, this takes a million parameters, but the only ones that we're interested in are the attacker and the source. So who was it, who done it, and with what? It's like clue. Sven killed us in Riverwood with the candlestick. So, let's paste that on in here, if I can say words. And yeah, we're gonna want this aggressor. It's an object reference. It should always be an actor, but maybe it can be something other than an actor. So I'm just gonna say actor attacker equals AK aggressor as actor. And just even before we get into the arrays, I'm gonna say if attacker, so if they were an actor, then we'll do our stuff. We'll do our cool stuff. If they're not an attacker, then we'll just ignore this. If you want to, we can just peace out. We can just say if you're not an actor for some reason, then we're not going to run this code. Cool. So what we want is whenever we get hit, we want to add an actor to a list. So first we're going to need a list, and we're going to make it a list of actors. Now you can make it here in the onHit function, just like so. Actor array actors equals something. But this will make the new array every time we get hit. And then every time we get hit, it'll just make a new array, and it won't store stuff between the different times that we get hit. So we want to store that outside of the event. So we're going to put it on up here. Put it up, put on up. And so we've got our actors up there. We could call them attackers if we wanted to. Whatever we want to do. And so let's track them. What we could do is just say, we want to basically say this. We just want to put the attacker in attackers. The attacker, I'll call it attacker list, so that when your eyes read this code, it's a little bit easier. So we want to put them in there. How do we do that? Well, if we had a full list of a bunch of attackers, we just use an index. So we say the 0th attacker, so the first one is equal to our attacker. I'm going to put this stuff back up on another line here. It's distracting me. It's distracting me. But what if we've got 2 attackers, or 3 attackers, or 4 attackers, or 5 attackers? This would just keep putting them in the same slot, plus the array itself hasn't actually been initialized. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Let's first handle the initialization of the array. We need to make it array. Make it array. This is just going to declare an array. So what we can do is we can say if the array has already been declared and has a thing in it. So if attacker list, then we'll do something else, we'll do something else. So what does that do? If attacker list tells you that if this returns true, then the attacker list is spelled like so, is an array. It's been like initialized, and it has 1 element in it or more. So we know that it exists. So if it exists, we'll do some stuff. But if it doesn't, let's initialize it. So here we go. We're going to initialize it. How do we do that? Well, we say attacker list equals a new array, and it's an actor array. So we make it a new actor array. You say those little brackets for array. But we need to define the size. How many? This will tell us that there's only going to be 1 actor in the array, and we can make this code work, but it'll only ever store 1. Versus we could have 10 actors, we could have 100 actors. We cannot have 1,000 actors, not without using SKSE, because the maximum is 128 by default for Papyrus. So what we could do for now, and we will do, is just say if the attacker list hasn't been set up yet, then we'll set up the list, and it'll have slots for 128. And then what do? We want to take our attacker and we want to put him in the list. Put the attacker into the list. And so again, if we do attacker list 0 equals the attacker, sure, it'll put them in the list, but it's just going to keep putting them in the first slot or element. So there's 128 of these little slots, and it's just going to keep putting them in the same spot. It's going to put all the actors in the first slot. So we need a number that goes up. let's use like a count of actors. We'll say int actor count, and we'll keep it outside of the event so that it's something that we can keep incrementing, and that number will persist outside. So we'll say by default we want this to be 0, not 1, because if you put something in the 1th slot of an array, it puts it really in the 2nd slot because these are 0 indexed. This puts it in the 1st slot. So let's do this. Let's say we'll assume that the actor count is 0 by default, but then whenever you put an attacker in there, we'll make the actor count 1 higher. So we'll do actor count at equals 1. There's our code. So we need to set up the list the first time, but then we'll put the attacker into the list. Well, this setup just needs to happen if the list hasn't been created. So what if we do it like this? We'll just say and if, and move this over here and do this. If the attacker list hasn't been set up yet, we'll set it up. And then this other code will always run. Whether it's the first time or the 128th time, we'll put the attacker into the list using this count. Now, it is going to blow up once it hits a number higher than 128. So, I mean, if you really wanted to, we could say, whenever you get hit, we could say if the actor count is greater than 128, we'll just bail. We won't do anything. If you wanted to, we could even print out a little message that would go into the Papyrus logs, like debug.trace. Oh noes, we've been hit by too many actors. Cool. That's what you kind of in theory should do whenever you're dealing with this style of Papyrus array, although we'll do array resizing with SKSE later on. So this will put them in the list, but we won't know if they go in the list. So what we'll do is whenever we get hit, let's just print out a little message and let's say who all has hit us. So if we're not using SKSE, we can't actually get the actor name that I know of, but we can get the form ID of each actor, and we can see in the box that it goes up. Once we set up SKSE, remind me, and we'll get the names working, but all we'll do for now is we'll say, let's just do this, debug message box actor list, or attacker. So we're just going to print out the whole attacker list. Attackers can, arrays can be cast to strings, which allows it to be passed to a message box, and they can be cast to booleans, which is what allows us to do this conditional up here and say if attacker list or if not attacker list. Those are super duper details that you don't need to know, but there's someone out there who cared. So I'm going to compile this and try it out in game. Just a little dumb thing here that someone at home probably noticed. We're saying we want to make sure that the attacker is an actor, otherwise we bail. So right now we're saying if they're an actor, return. We don't want that. We want if they're not an actor. So if the attacker is none, if it didn't get cast correctly. Now let's go to game. Alright, got my little Khajiit here. Let's run into Riverwood and see if Hilda saw a dragon.
A dragon! I saw a dragon!
Well, I come back here.
Never should have come here.
Alright, hit us and then we'll print out all the actors that we're tracking. Alright, we're printing out all of them. So that is 128 of them. So we can see Sven, who is 13,491, hit us. See if he'll hit us again. Come on, someone hit us. 13, so that's that's hot, I think. Then it looks like Sven hit us again. We keep getting hit by people. There's someone behind me. So this array is starting to fill up, which is pretty wonderful. I've got an arrow behind me. I was probably just about to die, and there I did. So one of them comes through as a trainer gold script. That's a certain type of actor, because there's someone in town who can be a trainer. So that's fantastic. And obviously one of the downsides you can see right there of there being 128, we're wasting all of that space, and it's just weird. But we won't fix that until we just did step 1, and we're going to do that on step 4. So step 2 is no longer putting Sven in the list more than once. We only want to do each actor in the list once, and that will get us set up for our next feature where we track how many times each unique actor hit us. So how do we do that? Right now we check to see that they're an actor. If the list hasn't been set up yet, we set it up. If the count is too high, we say, oh no, it's too high. We'll get rid of that later with SKSE. And then we put them into the list. So we just kind of blindly put them into the list every time we get hit. We're not checking to see if they're already in the list. Now to do that, we're going to actually have to look through the list and look for Sven or Alvor or Hod or whoever. So let's do code that's kind of like this. Let's say, I'll keep it as simple as I can. Boolean attacker already tracked. So by default, they're not already tracked in the system or already hit us. Something a little bit more explicit. So we'll say by default they haven't already hit us, and now let's look through the list to see if they have. Now if you're using Fallout 4, you can just say array.find to do what we're about to do, or rfind to search from the right side, but us in the old version of Papyrus and Skyrim, we got to do it the old-fashioned way. So we are going to make an index called 0, and then we're going to make that index bigger and bigger and bigger, bigger, bigger until we get to the end of the list, which in this case is going to search all 128. That will get faster once we start resizing our array, so it's not always 128. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Int index equals 0, and while that number is less than the attacker list dot length, for us in Skyrim, the only dot something you can do on an array is dot length. There's no other dot on top of an array, like actors have dot blah. Arrays, you can say dot length, and that is it. So we're going to make the index bigger as we go, and then we will check to see if they're in there. We'll say if the attacker at this spot in the list, so if this attacker at this spot in the list, and we use those brackets to get it, just like we use brackets to set something in the array, we use stuff to get it out. So if the attacker list bracket at this number, this index, is equal to, so double equals the current attacker that's attacking us, then we'll set attacker already hit us, not use, equal to true. And now it'll actually keep searching. It's going to actually go through all 128. So we can say while the index is less than the length, so while we haven't gone through all of them yet, and also while attacker already hit us is false. So we could say while that and not, we'd say or. That works for me. Now while we're less and they haven't already hit us, we'll go through the list. Now we can do a different conditional down here depending on whether they hit us or not. It'll be as simple right now as we'll only put them in the list if they haven't already hit us before. So if attacker already hit us, else, there really isn't an else. We're only going to do it if they haven't already. So if they haven't already, we'll do this. And so we'll say if not already hit us. Cool, and we'll add them to the array. And sure, we could keep printing it out if we want to, just to see that this whole code is triggering. So let me make sure that this compiles, and let's check this out in game. Okay, I got my Khajiit here again. Let's find out if she saw a dragon, and we will punch Sven in the noggin.
I saw a dragon.
What?
Or we'll miss.
What is it now, mother? Last mistake.
So let's get hit by him. So we see he took up a slot there. Let's get hit by him again. Cool. The array hasn't changed. Got hit again. The array hasn't changed. Looks like we got an arrow, and that came from this. We should get, I think that was another arrow, and they didn't get added to the list. pod here is probably going to hit us in a second if we don't die first.
Sign of
We
clear
die
down.
first, but you can see those arrows. So it tracked them uniquely, which is fantabulous. It's exactly what we wanted. So that is searching arrays. It's as simple as that. You just loop through them and check on the values. Let me see if my dog needs to go outside. And I'm back from my dog walk. What were we doing? What did we do? We just came back from the game, and it was tracking the actors uniquely, right? So now we want to track how many times each actor individually hits us. And for that, we're going to need another array. All right, let's make another array. So what we really would love to have in this case is something called a map, because what we want to do is we want to map an actor to how many times that actor hit us. Another actor to how many times that other actor hit us. We want to map one value, being the actor, to another value, being how many times they hit us. We want to associate one with the other. So sometimes you could do this with an associative array. You could do this with a map, also called a hash, also kind of called a hash map, slightly different things, but so far as the user is concerned, they're all the same thing. You map one thing to another. How do we do it without having maps? We just have arrays. Well, the simplest way to do it is just with two arrays. If we just have a single value that we're tracking per actor, in this case we do, we just have the hit count, or even if we had another value or something like that, all we need to do is we need a second array. We're just going to store the hit counts for each attacker. So we'll just do int array, so integers in this case for the times you get hit by the actor. Let's say attacker hit count. Now the way this is going to work is pretty simple. If you haven't already worked this out in your head, here's how it's going to work. Let's say we have got 5 actors. Actor 0, actor 1, actor 2, 3, 4. Sven, Hod, Hilda, Alvor, and the guy with the bow and arrow. F something, I forget. We got them. Each one of them starts hitting us. Well, in our array, Sven is in slot 0. Well, when Sven hits us, let's just in a second array update the integer in slot 0 to be 1. And then Sven hits us 2 more times, and we'll update this slot to be 3. Then Hilda hits us. She's in slot like 3. And so we'll go to slot 3, and we'll start updating the integer there. So that works great for, you can do this for tons and tons and tons of arrays for different stats that you're tracking, so long as they line up well. So we just need this attacker hit count. So we need to initialize it. We're also going to, until we get to resizing things, make it an array that's of size 128. So they're going to have the same size. We'll call it attacker hit count and say equals new integer array, just like we did before, and 128, so that they're the same size, so all the slots will line up. And now, whenever someone hits us, let's switch this around so there is an else. If the attacker has already hit us, they're going to be in the array. We know because we looped through the array and set attacker already hit us with some certain index. So we actually know if the attacker already hit us, then the last index is probably, though we increment +1 afterwards, is probably the index that that actor was at. Annoyingly, it'll be that index +1 because we do this, but we can fix that. So what do? We're going to update the hit count for that actor when they've already hit us. So let's say the int actor index for the hit count, wherever they are, that's going to equal this, basically. Let's say, I'll do this to make it a little bit easier. We'll do that. When we loop through, if the attacker is the one that we already found, then we say true, we already found them, which will break out of this while loop Otherwise, we'll keep incrementing the index, which eventually will break out of the while loop if we get to 128. So that way we know the index is the number. So if they already hit us, all we do is we say attacker hit count at this index, because it lines up properly, equals however many times they hit us before. And by default, it's going to be 0 for all the slots. So now the dog needed food. So by default, it's going to be 0 for all the slots. So we just increment it by 1. We say it equals whatever it is, which could be 0 or a bigger number, plus 1. So if they already hit us, we make the hit count go up. Otherwise, if they have not already hit us, we use this actor count thing, which is what we use to set the index of the attacker initially. And so we'll say attacker hit count at the same index is equal to 1. We'll just start it off with 1. And then instead of just printing out the attacker list, let's actually print out some text, and we'll say like blah hit us 1 time, 2 blah hit us 3 times. We can't get their names that I know of until we use SKSE in the next step. But what we can do is just print out form number blah hit us 2 times, and it'll work for our testing. We'll be able to see it quite clearly. So let's make some text. I'm just gonna call it, what do I want? I want string text equals blah, hit counts, new line. We'll debug message box. This text, we'll print it out, and then we're just gonna loop. We're gonna loop over all the actors, which we kind of did before. We'll do it again. We'll set index this time back equal to 0. And we'll say while the index, just like we did before, is less than the attacker list length, which is 128 right now, but we'll change that. And while the index at equals 0, and we're just gonna, if the attacker exists, because it's gonna be none, 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 right? Like we saw when it popped up. We'll say actor this attacker equals attackers or attacker list attacker list index, and then we'll say if this attacker otherwise, you know, it's just gonna be none because we got the 128 thing. So if there is one, then we'll print out how many times they hit us. We'll say this hit count equals the same index, the attacker hit count at that same index, and then we'll just print it out. We'll say text, we'll add to the text and say this attacker and hit us and this hit count, and we'll add a new line. Make sure that builds. See what I did, because I broke it. I was missing a little plus here. Just need a little plus. Boop. See if that builds, and let's go look at it in game. Didn't work. Don't do this. Don't increment by 0. Doesn't help anyone. You gotta go up by 1. Don't go up by 0. Back in Riverwood, let's find out about that dragon and who saw a dragon.
A dragon! I saw a dragon!
What? What is it now,
Okay,
Mother?
punch him.
You're as good as dead.
Yeah, let's see what we get. Let's see what we get. Come on, hit me, buddy. Cool. We've seen that number before. 13,491 hit us 1 time. Ooh, the trainer, the guy with the arrow, hit us once. Now hit me again, Sven. Cool, Sven hit us twice. 3 times. Let's get hit by someone else. Ooh, hard. Oh, Sven hit us a 4th time. Uh-oh, Alvor's with the big hammer. We're going down. We're going down. Ooh, that's a nasty sound. Alright, so that works. Cool. And if we look at our agenda, I was debugging. Let's grab that agenda and see where we're at. We did the unique actors. We tracked how many times we got hit by an actor. This is like an associative array kind of pair, that pair of arrays. And if you needed to track something else and something else and something else and something else, so long as those array sizes all map up and line up okay, you can keep tracking other things. So let's look at resizing arrays, because you cannot be a master at arrays until we've done this last thing, and then I think the storing arrays in arrays is kind of somewhere between a tip and an expert thing. I don't want you to leave an array episode without it. So resizing arrays. Right now what we have is, when we make these arrays to start with, zoom in. There we go. There we go. That debugger error go away. It's annoying. It's annoying me. Shoo. 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 Alright, there we go. We make these as 128. Well, let's keep them the actual size of the actor list, and let's let them go over 128. We're going to go ahead and get rid of this 128 thing. We're not even going to need that actor count. So what we're going to do now is, instead of making this the first time, sure, we could make that 1. If there isn't one, we'll make it 1. But we should do this just if we have an attacker, which we do. And so we started at 1, but then we need to find out if the attacker already hit us, because if they did, we just leave the array as is. We don't need to add to it. But if they're a new attacker, in addition to putting them in the list, we need to make the list bigger. So it's going to start at just 1, and we'll put that first actor in there, but then we want to make it bigger. We could kind of go back to, in this one if we wanted to, printing out just that full list of actors. I'm actually going to go ahead and, before we forget, say debug message box actor list, attacker list. That's what it was. So put the actor into the list, but first let's make it bigger. Make the list 1 element longer, larger, whatever you want to call it, to fit the new actor. So we'll resize it, and we can use SKSE's utility functions for this. You can use them for creating new arrays of a dynamic size. You cannot just put a variable in here. For example, if you say int 42, or like int num equals 42, you cannot do this. Papyrus will not allow you to do that. Those need to be static numbers. But you can use a dynamic variable like that to make an array if you have SKSE, or resize them. I'm just going to say utility dot, and we have an actor array and we have an integer array. So let's look for create, shows us the creation arrays. That's great. We want to look for resize. And we can resize an array of aliases, bools, floats, forms, ints, or strings. Well, ours are actors, so what do? We're going to have to turn our actor array into a form array to support this, but you're going to want to use this, I promise, in your Papyrus code, in your scripts. We already do have this int array, so let's start with that one. Let's resize the hit count. So what it wants is the in this case, integer array, which is the source array, and the new size that you want it to be. So that's the one we want, and we want its new size to be whatever the current size is plus 1. So we just say attacker hit count dot length plus 1. That's the new size. Now if we do this, the attacker hit count won't get bigger. Won't get bigger. Because what resize int array does is it returns a new integer array, and you have to update your existing array to match it. So if you just do this, which is really easy to do, and think your variable got resized, you need to say attacker hit count equals utility resize array attacker hit count with the new length. So that'll work for the integer. Let's do it for the actors, so for the forms. So what we're going to say is attacker list I can spell, I promise I can spell, equals resize the, for goodness sake, the attacker list and we'll make it the size of attacker list.length plus 1. But instead of resizing an integer array, in this case, we're doing a form array. Now it's going to complain because it says it can't cast an array of actors to a form array. So we're just going to have to do this. And mostly this will just work. So this is going to have to be form when we instantiate it for the first time. And mostly other than that, it'll mostly work. Here's where we pull an attacker out of the array. We know that they're actors, so we can say as actor and cast that form to an actor. Now, if your array holds multiple types of forms, like books and boots and actors, then you might want to check what type they are. So we should kind of be fine here. Let me see if this compiles. Let's check it out in game. Just as a reminder, we're going to have to run that with SKSE now because we are using that SKSE resize array function. Now I just noticed when we don't have a list, we make it here with one size, but then down here we're always making it bigger than it was, and so we always end up with it being like one bigger than it's supposed to be. So I'm just going to say whenever we get hit by an attacker, if it hasn't been set up, we'll make it a new form of 1. Otherwise, if it's already been set up before, then we'll resize it. Just like one little gotcha for that first time. For the first time, we know they didn't already hit us because it's a new actor. We haven't done anything yet. So if you haven't set up the actor list before, so we might want to reverse these because if not something followed by else is a little bit complicated and confusing. We'll say if there's already a list, make it bigger. Otherwise, set it up. Okay, and then what could be the second to last time that we do this, let's find out about the dragon that they saw.
A dragon! I saw a dragon!
Last mistake.
Cool. He hit me. Remember, we did that pop-up just to see the full list of items, and this used to have 128 items in it. Now it has 1, and we still have this other message box. So 1 hit us once, 1 hit us again. It still only has 1 in it. 1 hit us 3 times now. Ooh, we got shot by an arrow. So now the list has 2 in it. If we get hit by Hod here, we should get 3. So now there's 3 things. I guess it's a carry actor. That's neat. And there we go. There's the full hit count. We're pretty good here. We trust that it's working at this point. So now we no longer have that block of 128 actors, which A is just useful when we go through and try and do things like find actors. That's going to be a whole lot faster because we're not going through a full list of 128 each time. Also, this means that when we hit the point where it's more than 128, it'll work. I don't know at what limit it blows up and totally breaks and corrupts the game or something. Does it say online? No, it just says to be careful with these functions. Looks like the resize ones aren't even on the documentation, just the create ones. And whatever the size you give it, be very, very careful that it's the size that you want and not like a negative number, for example, which apparently can cause major, major issues. So what do we do next? Let me go to the agenda. And here we are. We're back in the agenda. We've done most of this. We did the basics of arrays. You can use brackets to set an array. You can use brackets and a number to get something out of an array, or you can use that to set stuff in an array. We're good. We're golden on the basics, aren't we? We searched arrays. We looped over them. We know how to set our index equal to 0. We know how to do our while loop while the index is less than a length. We're good, and we can check for things inside of arrays. Now, we did what I call associative array pairs, but it doesn't have to be just a pair of arrays. It can be as many as you want. We had actors, and then the number of times that they hit us. But then after that, we could have their favorite color, their date of birth, their shoe size, their whatever. Think of that as a spreadsheet that's kind of flipped on its side, where each row would be each actor, and that's a different element in an array, but each dimension, each piece of information is actually in a separate array. Very, very useful pattern when you're using Papyrus arrays, and I love it. And then we looked at using SKSE, super useful because you can resize arrays, you can get beyond the 128 element limit, and you can also create them of a given size, not just resize them. We didn't use the creation functions, but after using the resize ones, I trust that you could do it. Now, storing arrays in arrays is a little bit more tricky. There's a couple patterns for doing it. There's a big truck outside. Couple different patterns for doing it, and you can find them on the arrays page on creationkit.com. You want to look under multi-dimensional arrays and specifically arrays of arrays. This is a really great pattern, and I planned on showing this to you, obviously, because it is here in the agenda. Now, I tried recording this a couple times, this last segment. I couldn't get it under 30 minutes, and we're already just over 40 or so. So I think I'm going to plan that for a future episode that'll dedicate just to that. It might come out after this because I would love to get this array episode out to folks. So apologies for that. Check out the creationkit.com arrays page if you're interested in some of the patterns. The TLDR there is if you want arrays and arrays, you can attach scripts to objects and have the script have multiple arrays, and then have an array of your scripts. So that's one tip. Let me know down in the comments if you super duper want to see that, and I will get around to it eventually because I've got lots of recording that I am doing. So thank you so much, and as always, y'all, happy modding. Right, happy modding, everyone.